I will call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Tuesday, October 4th, 2011. And I wonder if you would all please rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good thing I wasn't singing the national anthem.
Hold on to the Super Bowl.
I know.
Could we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Clements.
Here.
Commissioner Lundy.
Here.
Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Peralt.
Here.
Commissioner Seibel. Commissioner Coast.
I note that we have a quorum
Do we have a
present
quorum?
with quorum members present. Could I have a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda, please?
I so move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion, any alterations to the agenda? Then all those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
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 Those opposed? The agenda is approved. Have you all had an opportunity to look at the minutes of the last meeting? Then I'd like to entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I move we approve minutes for last meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? I have a couple of items I'd like to add. On page 2, in the very first paragraph, following the sentence that says, Commissioners Peralt and Lundy recused themselves as having a personal interest in the outcome of the application, I would like to add a sentence, a quorum consisting of 4 members remained. And then further down in that same page, in the paragraph that begins Mr. J. Gerard, it should be Dr. J. Gerard. And later in that, the next to the last line, the lights for the parking lot will be, insert the word be, low. And then finally on the third page, in the next to the last paragraph, just before the new business section, I believe when there was a remark about the landscaping should be xeriscaping and in harmony with nature, could you scratch nature and say the natural vegetation of the area, which is what I think was actually said in the motion. Is there any other discussion of the minutes, additions, or changes?
It's kind of a minor thing, but I think Dr. Gerard's name has one too many R's in it.
I think so too.
Thank you. Any further comments? All those in favor of approving the minutes for the September meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes. I see we have no old business tonight, so our next order of business will be a public hearing. The hearing is entitled DA 11-01, a request for a dimensional adjustment to allow the boundaries between 2 adjacent tracts of land held in common by the same owner to be adjusted such that one tract results in no more than a 10% modification from the dimensional standard of a lot in Residential B as required by the Land Use and Zoning Code of 2010. This commission will serve as the hearing board for this hearing, and I, as chairperson, will be the presiding officer. This case involves, as I said, dimensional adjustment request. Have any of the members of this hearing board had any ex parte communication with anyone involved in this matter?
No.
That being the case, we can move to the swearing in. If any of you who would like to testify either in favor of or against this application, if you would please step forward and we will swear you in. All together, all at the same time.
It's a party, Tom.
If you will all raise your right hand, please, and repeat after me. I state your full name.
I, Luann Mitchell,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that the testimony I am about to give
that the testimony I am about to give
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth,
will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth,
on penalty of perjury.
on penalty of perjury.
Thank you. And would you stay in place until Luann has an opportunity to get all of your names? And first, we will have the staff report on this application. And unfortunately, we don't have any video to go with it or any slides, but Mr. Coates, would you please proceed?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chairman, Commissioners. I apologize for the technological difficulties. It was working before. I'm not sure what the problem is. Tonight we have dimensional adjustment DA 1101. This is, from what I understand, a relatively rare type of application. And to give you some background, within the land use code, there's some dimensional requirements for lot sizes, depending on use of the lot and the zoning that it's in. In residential B, a lot size for a single-family dwelling is 5,000 square feet. Mr. McCoy, our applicant tonight, has a lot or a parcel that has basically two lots on it that he's wanting to sell part of his parcel as one lot and maintain his residence on the other lot. The lot that he would like to sell has a home on it, or a residence, and when he came in originally to ask to divide his lot or his parcel into two lots, they said, well, we can make it into 5,000 square feet, and then you'll have another 7,000 or so in your resident lot. And when he started looking at it a little bit closer, he realized that if he had that 5,000 square foot next door, he'd no longer have access to his shop for a car, or to a place for him to build a handicap ramp from where he normally parks his car out around and into his front door. So we talked about how to put together a permit or an application that would allow him to make that adjustment, and that's what we're asking for tonight, or what he's asking for tonight, is a dimensional adjustment so that he can separate his lots or his parcel into two lots, one of which would only be about 4,500 square feet, which would be a 10% less than the standard size of a lot in the residential area. The reason for him needing this is because he already has an easement to his shop, but he needs to have some place where he can park his car and then build a ramp from that point around to his front door, because the front door doesn't have any other non-sloped or non-stairwayed point into his front door. So he's asking that dimensional adjustment be allowed. The potential buyer of his property has said that she has no problem with the lot size being less than 5,000 square feet. If you think about his neighborhood, which is in the Chihuahua Hill Historic District, there could potentially be a number of lots that have less than 5,000 square feet. And also, you might look at into several of the parcels just on his block and find different configurations of dwellings and other structures on the lots. And you'd find that there would probably be no reason to think that 5,000 square feet or less than 5,000 square feet is going to be outside of the bounds of what could be considered a normal or a typical lot in that area. He has been very cooperative in his efforts, and he talked with all of his neighbors, the 60 neighbors around the area, and he had no one say that they were opposed. We've had no one call in to us saying that they were opposed to his dimensional adjustment request. And we've actually had 2 phone calls, one which I reported in the report, and the other one came in yesterday after the report was already processed, saying no problem at all, don't want to stand in the way of Mr. McCoy's request. So he's met those requirements as far as getting his public participation process put together. Do you have any questions thus far? And I apologize. I had some great pictures, great shots of the property.
Sure. Is the vehicular access here?
It's an easement from whatever the next street up is, and he has an easement that's surveyed and part of the property divisions around.
So the idea is to facilitate bringing a vehicle into this space and then a ramp like this to get into the house.
Exactly. And that's the way he's been doing it all along. That is his access for a vehicle on the parcel as it sits right now. Peter Russell, the Community Development Director, has indicated that if this dimensional adjustment does go through, that he would have no problem making an administrative division of the parcel so that Mr. McCoy could then go through with his future plans of sale of that portion of his parcel. Any other questions?
Any further comments or questions by commissioners? Then, Mr. McCoy, would you like to come up and state your case? And excuse me a second. I want to explain to you that you have been instructed, I hope, that it's your obligation to meet all 4 of the findings. That is, that the adjustment is consistent with the stated purposes of the Land Use Code, that the adjustment is consistent with the comprehensive plan, the granting of the adjustment will not be detrimental to public health, safety, comfort, convenience, and general welfare, and will not adversely affect the established character of the surrounding neighborhood. And finally, that the dimensional adjustment will not be injurious to the property improvements in the vicinity of the property for which a dimensional adjustment is requested. You have to address each of those points in your presentation. Great. Please come forward to the microphone and let us hear what you have to say.
Directly go with this, or should I give you a little history of what we're doing? I think Jim did a pretty good job, really.
You may do it however you like.
Okay, well, we've lived on Chihuahua Hill, my wife and myself, for 21 years now. And when we first got to town, Carol has MS, and it's a chronic progressive thing, and when she first got here, she could get around somewhat, and we could get up and down the steps a little bit. And then over time, that started to go away. Our neighbor, Jesse Mongay, was nice enough to let us go out our front door and go across his front yard and down his driveway. So we did that for about 10 years. And Jesse died about 3 months ago. And so basically there went our means of egress we can't really access the street without going across their property now, and I'm sure that's going to change hands at some point, and that'll be out of our jurisdiction or whatever. So that's why we're casting about for this dimensional adjustment. I've got a copy of the findings here. I'll see if I can't make sense out of them. It's the requested dimensional adjustment is consistent with the stated purposes of the land use code. The land use code and the comprehensive plan, I've read through some of it, and to me I see it basically as a means of neighbors and people living together and certain rules that must be met in certain dimensions and things. And I guess my response to number 1 and 2 both are that this parcel of land is not changed in any way. It has the same. It's going to have the same utility now, before and after this dimensional adjustment. It's not like if it passed the land use code previous to this and the comprehensive plan previous, then I see no reason why it shouldn't pass it, now, because it has the same utility as it always had. Number 3, the granting of adjustment will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, and comfort, convenience, and established character of the neighborhood. And once again, it's the same piece of property. It has cars parked down it. It has some things on it. It hasn't changed in any way that would that would affect its ability to fulfill number 3. And number 4, the requested dimensional adjustment will not be injurious to the property or improvements in the vicinity of the property for which a dimensional adjustment is requested. And once again, my response is the same. It's the same piece of property and its utility has not changed. So if it was previously approved, I don't see how it could not be approved now. I guess the only other thing I'd say is it would be a real hardship for us not to be able to have this spot as a landing zone to build a handicap ramp to, because this family next door is nice enough to let us continue using their property, but at some point we know things change and that'll go away. And so that's why I'm here asking your indulgence.
Any questions for the applicant? Just to be clear, Mr. McCoy, the dimensional adjustment you're requesting does not exceed the 10% of the lot size, correct? Of the allowed lot size. Thank you.
I do have one question. Will the newly formed lot that is going to be short of the 5,000 square feet still have adequate off-street parking? I believe that 2 are required by the land use code. Is there room on that lot for...
Yes, there is. There's a... Well, I could show you on the map there.
Okay. I know there's something labeled garage, but that's on the property that's on yours.
That's on. And
over here in the center.
Okay, this is Baird Street up here, and this is where the easement comes down. This is a house on this lot. This is their easement, and this is the easement to this lot. Here, this is about 25 feet here.
So they currently park their cars?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is the area that I'm looking at from the front door.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. McCoy? Thank you, sir. You may sit down.
Thanks for your time.
Is there anyone else who would like to testify in favor of this application? If so, please come forward. Please state your name and address.
Ken Champlin, and I live at 4693 Highway 15. And thank you, Madam Chairman and members, for allowing me to state my thinking. I have a very special interest in this case because Carol's my sister, and she has, as Tom explained, endured MS for many years, and it's a progressive kind of a disease, and fortunately for her, it's slowly deteriorating. But in this situation, should they lose access to the street for her, basically she becomes essentially a prisoner in her own home for all intents and purposes. And she enjoys the town and the people in the town, and has a life that I would like to see continue. So I would seek your favorable response to this so that she can continue to live her life in reasonable comfort.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My name's Ron Murray. I live at 212 South Bayard Street, and my kitchen window has a view of the property, the piece of land that we're talking about here. It's also a matter of safety for Carol to have a way to get herself out of the house if she needs to, and that's really all I got to say about it. So please take that into consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in behalf of this application, please?
My name is Sarah Boyette, and I recently moved to 406 San Vicente, which is the property in question, the parcel that the McCoys would like to sell. I moved here from Montana because I fell in love with this house over the internet, and when I came to look at it, was further smitten, and not only by it, but by the neighborhood as a whole, and moreover, Silver City. I do have some background in historic preservation, community planning, those kinds of things, and despite my obvious personal interest in this, I would like to say to you in all sincerity that I do believe when a home goes from rental to owner-occupied, that's typically a good thing, and I certainly intend to do that. And that's not in any way to say that the McCoys haven't been very, very fine landlords. The property's been taken very good care of. But over the years, tenants come and tenants go. But a homeowner who's there for the long term, I think, is a good thing for the community. And so that being said, and also for the other obvious reasons of the McCoys being able to live a life with access for Carol, I would ask you to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope once you settle in with your background, you will apply for the Planning and Zoning Commission. We have a vacancy.
Just if I didn't have to go to meetings.
Only once a month.
Only once a month. Is there anyone else who would like to testify?
My name is Ardeen Rickman, and I live at 201 South Pinos Altos Street, and I live across the street from the McCoys. The neighbor's driveway that they have been using is very steep, and I can see when I see Tom pushing Carol up that steep driveway to get to their front door, my heart aches for him because, like me, he's not getting any younger. And as they age, regardless of what happens to that access that they now have from the neighbor who has just passed, there's going to come a time when that's going to be extremely difficult for him to push the chair up the hill to his front door. And this new access would give them the peace of mind that there are alternatives to what is available for them. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Please come forward.
My name's Nancy Champlin. I live at 4693 Highway 15, and obviously Carol is my sister-in-law. Carol is an artist in the community. She loves to get out in the area downtown and visit with the other artists and be a part of the community. It would be a tragedy if she couldn't be there, so I urge you to consider this. It gives her her freedom and a really good life to be out and about. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant or any of those who testified?
I have a question for staff.
Okay.
And this could be Jim, it could also be Luann or Zan. Explain to me the logic of this dimensional standard of the lot in Zone B. What's the logic or the basis for that number, that size of lot? Where does that come from?
For the 5,000 square feet?
How did we pick that?
I don't know. That's been in the land use code forever, as far as I know. I think it's a standard lot size in many communities, but I really don't know anything more than that.
I think it goes hand in hand with how much frontage it has. I know that there have been requests in the past that have been denied because there was not also that frontage, and in this case, they are going to still have the 50 feet, but I don't know either. Somewhere along the lines it was determined a buildable lot was 5,000 square feet, but I think it goes hand in hand with the street frontage.
I agree. It goes in other communities. It frequently goes to frontage. In certain zoning cases, the neighborhood I grew up in outside of Washington D.C. There were all 60-foot frontages, and all the lots were laid out on the grid 100 feet deep. So every lot was 6,000 square feet, and it was just a function of how land was subdivided at that particular point in time, and the establishment of frontages of certain widths that allowed houses of a certain size to be built, including side yard setbacks.
If you look at the original surveys, most of the lots are 25 feet and 100 feet deep. So there's some areas that you can build on that are 25-foot lots, but that 5,000 is based on that 50 by 100.
My house sits on 2 lots, and they're both 25 by 100. And the 2 lots next to me, which are vacant, are also the same size.
Right. I'm just curious if, in the future, as this lot changes hands, is this going to cause trouble for future people? Say, if that house burned or something, would they not be allowed to replace it because it didn't meet the 5,000 square feet?
That wouldn't be my understanding of the dimensional adjustment, because once it's split, it is what it is.
Right, but does this second tract of land remain a buildable lot if it ever became a lot and not an occupied lot with a building on it? That's my question.
Well, it will be.
Right, but I'm saying, let's say, next month we have an earthquake and half the buildings in town fall down, and this building happened to be one of them. Would we be creating a lot here that in the future someone couldn't build on?
I can't say for sure, but it would be my understanding that the buildability will pass with the change is going to follow the land. And so you're not going to have that it's not going to be a non-conforming use. It's just a lot that is now what it is.
I think consistent with what Mr. Coates had said, in the character of the neighborhood, there are many other lots that are certainly less than 5,000 square feet in that neighborhood. So any rebuild would still be consistent with patterns within the neighborhood, and I'm sure that would be taken into account.
Okay.
Sam, you have an interest in the non-conformability. Do you get that same reading?
I just think by approving it, it makes it an approved lot and
Right.
and therefore not non-conforming. I don't think it's going to be grandfathered in or anything because we're actually approving it.
Exactly.
Okay. That was my only concern.
Good question, Nick.
Commissioners, are you ready to make a decision in this matter? Could I have a motion, please?
Sure, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt dimensional adjustment DA 11-01, request for dimensional adjustment to allow the boundaries between two adjacent tracts of land to be adjusted, resulting in no more than a 10% modification from the dimensional standard of a lot in residential B as required by the Land Use and Zoning Code of 2010. Properties are 406 San Vicente Street and 212 Pinos Altos Street, and with the following findings. I find that this adjustment, this requested dimensional adjustment permit is consistent with the stated purposes of the Land Use Code, that this dimensional adjustment is consistent with the stated purposes of the comprehensive plan. The granting of this adjustment will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, comfort, convenience, and general welfare, and will not adversely affect the established character of the surrounding neighborhood. And the requested dimensional adjustment will not be injurious to the property or improvements in the vicinity of the property for which a dimensional adjustment is requested.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you, George. Discussion. I wonder if we should, noting what the meter people said, the utility people, put in a stipulation that the constructed ramp, walkway, access ramp does not interfere with any of the meters on the sidewalk. It would run along the sidewalk, would it not?
Not the sidewalk in front of the house. This is the sidewalk in front of our door, which is 4 feet above the sidewalk. So there would be no way it's interfacing.
So there are no meters that would be adjacent to it?
The utility, the easement, I created, this is not a utility easement back there, it's just it's an easement to allow people to get in there. So I've not set up as a utility pipes.
The meters were satisfied, the meter department was satisfied that that was not going to change, as long as they maintain the access to them and they're in this sidewalk.
I think that's pretty much what they always say, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just sort of their standard disclaimer. So.
Well, I wasn't sure there really was potential for it to interfere with the meter, so thank you for clearing that up. Is there any further discussion?
I would just like to comment that the McCoys must be special people because what I've seen here tonight reflects the merits of small town America and reflects the merits that neighborhoods are made up of people, not structures. It felt good to hear you all come together and talk about this. What kind of tomatoes do you have?
Wait till after we vote before you ask questions like that, right?
Well, I certainly second those sentiments. I think it's a wonderful testament about the kind of neighborhood that you all live in, that you've come together to support a neighbor who really did need your support. So thank you for coming, and thank you for being such good citizens and good neighbors.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I hope the McCoys know that the questions that I asked didn't have anything to do with, the merits of the ramp or this particular case. It's just sometimes you got to ask questions like that. I do always sort of wonder, I feel like a strong land use code that we can get behind as a community is important, and I know we're always in the process of looking at the land use code, and anytime I come across a number like 5,000 square feet, I wonder where does that number come from and why is it there? if there's a reason for it, then I think it ought to remain. But I guess I need to do a little more research to satisfy myself as to why that's a good number to have in there, or whether we need to have a number at all.
Well, keep asking those questions. I think it's an important method of public education, and because we do have an audience that faithfully watched this program, to my continuing astonishment, nevertheless. Any further discussion?
I'd just like to say that on the finding number 3, not only is it not detrimental, but to me, adding a ramp to any house, it makes it better for safety, comfort, convenience for citizens in general every time we do that. And I think it's more all-encompassing for all of our citizens when we do that. So I think it's taking us an advancement in that finding.
I think we're ready to vote. Could you call the roll, please, Joanne?
Okay. Commissioner Clemens?
Yes.
Commissioner Lundy?
Yes?
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Peralt?
Yes.
Commissioner Seibel?
Aye.
The motion passes. Congratulations. I hope you use your ramp in good health and continue to enjoy for many years. I note we have no new business. However, I did put an item on the community forum which we hadn't previously discussed, because it came to my attention that the opportunity for public input on the Penny Park rebuild was about to expire, and I thought it would be useful to give the community an opportunity to come and discuss it. And I did invite a number of people from the early childhood community to look at the concepts and give us some feedback, and I was hoping some of them would come in person, but I do have some information that they want to share with us that I will be sharing. But first, Mr. Coates, are you prepared to give us a brief rundown on the 5 different concepts for Penny Park rebuild?
Well, actually, I had taken pictures and had another PowerPoint to show you.
At least you have the hard versions here, right?
The pardon?
At least you have the hard copies.
I have the hard copies, yes. And there's been a lot of, we've had these in the community development office now for almost a month, and I was also at the Red Hot Children's Fiesta, where it was introduced by the mayor to the community. And a lot of people look at, what's the difference? It takes a child's eye to see the difference between those concepts. We've had a number of children come through, or at the Fiesta, they were able to see those little bitty things. For us, they seem little bitty. They probably seem really big to the child. But number 4, concept number 4 on the far right, there's only one swing on that little hoop-de-doo on the far right, and one child says, who'd want to swing by themselves?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good input.
There's a rock that kids think, wow,
That's
that looks
cool.
like it would be a cool thing to climb on. And that's on, number 2 and...
It's on number 5 as well.
Number 5, right. So there's just minor differences, but I talked with Peter Pena yesterday, who is in charge of getting all that put together and will have responsibility for making it happen. And he said that concept number 1 is the high end. That's where, if that happens, then that's where the big money is, okay? 2, 3, and 4 are just modifications of number 1, based on little bitty different configurations of what kind of playthings there would be. Number 5, the major difference in it is they're leaving one of the old unburnt structures. You can see it's a square picture there on the kind of the center left. He wanted to emphasize that all of the new equipment is going to be as unflammable as possible and made out of hard plastics, concrete, steel, and that his intent for getting the public input is not to say we have to choose between 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. It's a concept, and if you want to vote for concept 1 and say, but I'd sure like that rock over there as well, or I'd like the Eiffel Tower that's part of 3 and 4 instead, but with a shade structure somewhere on it. Those are all possibilities that he's trying to get as much input from the community as possible about what's there and what could be there, and then they'll start really designing. So that's the major difference between the concepts, is they're all open for negotiation, and the children are the ones that really have the eye for it. So, any questions?
Were you able to capture the comments of the children at the Red Hot Children's Fiesta?
Actually, I didn't capture too many, other than just hearing kids going, "Wow, I really like this one," or "I really like." I was in the same booth, but I was running a bicycle pedestrian planning process, so I didn't have that much to do with it. That day, though, there were little stickies on the posters, just with pointers showing the differences from each one. So it was a little bit easier for people to see, even though it was still for us folks with the weaker eyes to determine the differences.
What's the time frame for obtaining public input on this before some form of decision is made?
Peter didn't say. He just wants to get as much input as he can, and probably as long as people are talking about it, he's willing to listen.
The newspaper said the cutoff date for public input was October 10th, which is why I thought it would be a good idea to discuss it tonight.
He didn't mention that to me, but we didn't talk time frame.
So what are we going to do in the next 6 days to get as much public input as possible?
Ask Peter Pena. We're encouraging people to come to the Community Development Office at 12th and Hudson, upstairs at the Town Hall Annex. That's where they're all laid out, and there's a ballot box and numbers of ballots, and you can spend as long as you want to in the lobby just looking at the various concepts, and spend time filling out as many ballots as you'd like. Nobody said it's a one man, one vote type of deal. And if you want to write as many comments, there are places for comments on the ballots as well. So,
how are you encouraging people?
Me? Oh, you mean in the office?
You said we are encouraging people to come into the department.
Well, right now we're encouraging people on air. We haven't been advertising. We were asked to just house them in the office. When people come into the office, we encourage them by saying, "Did you take a look at these? We're asking for public input." And whether they're coming in for a manufactured home moving permit or a variance or whatever, we're saying, please take a look at this. That's our basic encouragement. We're not out beating the drums to get people in, but I guess somebody should be.
Why don't we take out a half-page ad in the 2 newspapers?
There was an ad in the newspaper.
Jim.
Yes, Nick.
I'm going to make some comments, and I want to say up front that these aren't directed at you, and they really aren't directed at any specific individual in the town.
So can I sit down and not be on the...
Well, I have to, somebody has to be there. I mean, I could direct them to the chair, I suppose, what I'm really supposed to do. Madam Chair, what really concerns me about this process is... I should start by saying that I was involved in some small way in the original Communityville Park process. And I was in high school when that began. And I remember even thinking then that it was a crazy idea and that it would never happen. And although I was involved because I thought it was kind of cool, I thought, we're sitting around wasting our breath because this is so huge and so different from anything that we've ever done in this town before that nothing's going to come of it. And as we all know, something did come of it. And it was, I think, one of the defining moments in this community in the past couple of decades in that it brought people together and showed what we were capable of as a community if we worked together. That is what the Community Built Park has always symbolized for me. My concern with this process, including this public input that we're requesting tonight, is when I look at those depictions of park equipment, it kind of reminds me of those games we used to play in the kids' magazines when I was younger. Find the differences, circle the things that are different in each picture. To me, what we're talking about here tonight is a long way from the collaborative, community-involved process that created the original Community Built Park. I've had an opportunity to look at the work done by this company that designed this equipment, and I think they do fine equipment. I think it will be a very nice playground, but it will not be our Community Built Park. And as long as we as a community are really clear about that distinction, then I guess that's okay. It does kind of bother me that we're presented with this opportunity to come together again as we did 15 years ago to do this as a community, and we're passing up that opportunity in the name of expediency. I think there have been a couple of good proposals put forward about how we could do another community process, and I know there have been at least one, because I came up with one and submitted it to the mayor and the city manager, and they may be looking at that and looking for ways to incorporate pieces of that. But I know that a lot of people have talked to me about their dissatisfaction with the options that are being presented. Not, again, that they are inferior options, but that it is an inferior process. And so those are my 2 cents, and I think we as a community have an opportunity at the next town council meeting to make our voices heard if we believe that a more open process from the beginning is needed in this. I think it's time for the people that have been talking to me to show up. I think the next council meeting would be the time to say, hey, we're interested in opening this up a little more, going into the schools and having kids say, what do I want? Instead of saying, which one of these would I prefer, saying, what would I want in my ideal park? Because that's how it happened the first time, and I think that's how it ought to happen again. And then we ought to come together and build it. And I understand from these folks and other people that I've talked to that that is certainly possible, and it's even possible in a timeline that's very similar to the timeline we're talking about for this process. And so I would like to see that happen, and if there are other people in the community that feel the same way, I hope that they'll make their voices heard over the next week. And I think that the next council meeting next Tuesday would be a great place to do that.
Thank you. Well, I have some strong views on this process as well, and I do agree with very much of what you've said. Although I also sympathize with the mayor and the council who have tried in the past to get more community input into this process, and it just wasn't happening. And I think it's out of desperation that they have really turned to this concept. But I think the difference between all of these designs and the Penny Park that we all love so much was that that was an inspired plan. It was an inspired space for children and adults to be. These are adequate playgrounds, but they're not inspired. And I totally agree with the idea that we need to get children's input into this. Just as Mr. Coates said to us, it takes a child's eye. So why aren't we going into the schools with this? Why aren't we having focus groups with first graders and with fifth graders to see how different age children would react to this park? One of the great things about Penny Park, it really did span the age groups. It had places for very young children. It had places for elementary school age children and for older children. And one of the things that I think is really wrong with these different concepts is that they aren't balanced in terms of the age groups that that equipment is designed to serve. Only one of them really has very good balance. as I said, I did speak to the people at the early childhood programs at Western New Mexico University, and Terry Anderson called me and apologized for not being able to be here to testify, but she did give me some input that she wanted me to share with you. And this was not just her view. She and 4 of her top administrators, the director for the La Familia program, the director for the Lab Site program, and some of her other staff went down to community development and looked at these designs in detail, and this is what she said. She felt that of the 5 plans, Plan 5 is definitely the best, and the reasons that they preferred it, and this was a unanimous vote of those early childhood experts, was that the wooden structure that still exists was retained, which she thought was good. They all really liked the Dragon Jungle Gym. There was a good balance between toddler and older children in the 5th plan that is missing in the others. She also felt that the loss of the amphitheater is sad, and I'd also like to address that. That was a hugely underutilized, valuable resource for this community. I don't think we ever used it properly, not for very many events. But nevertheless, I hate to see that asset go, because it's the only outdoor performing space that we have besides the little cupola in Goff Park. It would have been a great place for musical and dramatic performances, as well as the summer movies that a lot of people did enjoy going to. It was kind of sheltered from the weather a little bit, and that made it a very nice space. One of the other comments I personally have about the designs is that even in Design 5, there is not adequate shade for either the children or for adults in any of these designs, because we have to remember that the park isn't the way we remember it. Those big trees are gone, and with them there's shade, and it will be 20 years before we have good shade trees again in many parts of the park, which means that in the summer, which is the peak time for usage of the park, we need to think about more shade structures. So even if plan number 5 were selected, I would hope that they would incorporate the shade structures that's shown in the first 2 concepts and add that in. And they definitely need a covered space for adults to sit out and watch their children, because that was one of the nice things, that parents and grandparents had a nice place to sit and they could observe their children. I also see the lack of a big sandbox, which is a great thing to have. There isn't one on any of the designs that I can see. The other great thing that my kids and my grandkids always loved about Penny Park were all those little cubbies that existed under the wooden structures. They liked those little hidden spaces that only a 3 or 4-year-old could get into. There was one place on one of the other structures, and maybe it's on the structure that's still standing, where a tire swing hung down into kind of an empty space. Kids loved that because it was cozy and it was small, and they could crawl in there and they could make it kind of their own imaginary play space. All of these concepts are lacking in that kind of imagination play that was so rich in the other design. And that is why Nick is so dead on when he says, we need the input of children in this. We need to be asking children, what do you want on your playground? Even though that park has twice been vandalized by young people in this community, it stood for many years, and it was amazing how little vandalism went on. Why do you think that was? Because the children of this community really felt ownership of that park. And I don't think maybe this is more vandal-proof, but I don't think anybody's going to feel that same level of ownership. Are there any other comments on the Penny Park rebuild?
Question. You just mentioned how the first one is high-end, which I assume means it's more expensive. How are these being paid for? Is this tax dollars? How is this being paid for?
Insurance.
entirely being covered by insurance?
That's my understanding.
And if we did
That's
it,
going to be the limiting factor, too.
and that's what prevents us, am I correct, from doing it the community-built way? Would insurance cover anything toward redoing it as it had been done in the past, or?
I've had several conversations on that very point with the mayor, with the city manager, with some other folks, and my understanding is that this time around, instead of being you get this much for volunteers or this much for a contractor, they're basically just going to negotiate a settlement based on that bid that they got for the reconstruction of the quarter of the park that burned earlier. So they're basically going to adjust that bid that they got and extrapolate that out to the rest of the park equipment, and that will be the money they'll get. So my understanding is that those strings about volunteer versus non-volunteer build will no longer be there.
Okay.
Even if, for some reason, those constraints remained, in my discussion with some park professionals, there are ways around that, in that you could still bid the contract to a contractor, but one of the parameters in the bid would be that there be a community process and that community labor be involved. So a contractor would be taking on the responsibility to construct it, but a lot of the labor would be provided by the community. Okay. So I think there's a number of ways to approach it. If we decided as a community that one of the things that was important to us would be this community process, there are ways to accommodate that no matter what the constraints might be.
Okay, and then is it on the agenda at the next meeting with the town council?
Haven't seen an agenda yet. They were just finishing the packets today.
Right.
I had requested that Luann doesn't ordinarily take minutes of our community forums, but I did ask her to take notes of this one that we could pass on as our input to the community council. And if there's anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this issue, I'd invite you to come up and address us.
I didn't plan to come here. I thought I was coming to the other meeting. But I live right by Penny Park, and it's been wonderful. And I was there from the very start when they built it, and I have wonderful pictures of that time and the people that were constructing. And I think that I should give them to somebody. I don't know who to give them to, but I think that we need to remember that at least. And and the park was always full of kids and wonderful things and activities, and it's such a shame that it would be children that would do this, to vandalize. And I would like to see some other things done for the children in the community, some other things that would keep them active and keep them involved and keep them out of trouble. Because it's just a wonderful thing. And when I have company, that's where I take them over to Penny Park. And Penny Park was because all the kids save their pennies, so it's kind of important to the community. And I just went home to visit with my family in Indiana, and there's a fine park there, Father Ritter Park, and I was looking at that. It seems to be way nicer than any of these things. I mean, is this the only company that's involved in this? Well, I have a problem with that because I think sometimes this town has a way of just working with one group and not looking at other things, and I think that limits what can be done. And but Father Ritter Park, it's kind of plastic and steel, but it's much nicer and more wonderful than what I'm seeing here. I don't know who built that. I don't know whether it's a company that could come here, or is it an access thing? Is that why that they just go with one group of people?
My understanding, again, in my research, has been that the reason this company was selected is in state procurement, the state will take bids for a specific service or a specific product. Like, for instance, there's a company that gets the state contract for installing toilets in state parks and that sort of thing. But once the state awards that contract, any state subdivision, any county or city or school district can go and use that bid. So without having to advertise for bids, without having to go through that process, you can say, hey, the state already said this is the best deal, and you can go with it without having to go out for bid. So this company is the company that has the state contract for playground equipment, and so the town, if they select this vendor, can do it without having to go through the bid process.
And I think that's a problem. And I've experienced that myself. I got a home rehab project, and I've had a very serious problem with that. There's one group that's coming out of Anthony that does all these projects. Very poor quality work, and I can't get anybody to listen to me. But apparently, whatever this bid process is, I wasn't a part of. Somebody else accepts these bids. Nobody was overseeing that work. It was really a terrible, terrible thing that happened at my own home. And I think that maybe somebody needs to check into that and see. The bid process should be up to more than one person, one group, one company, because there's just problems with that. And I'd like to see the park built again and the kids have a place and more things for the kids in the community.
Thank you.
You want to talk to me?
No, go ahead.
I'm not a parent. I have Kirby, my little dog, but I've been listening. And what I feel in my heart about this is we have to recognize that evil exists in this town. It's been demonstrated twice. And when evil exists, it takes extra energy and effort to overcome. And what I'm hearing here is bureaucratic efficiencies or expediting of accomplishing something to take care of a consequence of evil. And when you take the expedient approach to overcoming that, you lose. It's a temporary fix. It's going to be a Band-Aid. That you're perfectly correct when you say anytime I've been involved in community efforts where the community comes together, there's a much more magnification of worth and effort and consequence. And to overcome the evil that exists out there, I believe you cannot take an expedient, cost-effective, insurance-laden, easy, quick-fix solution. It takes blood, sweat, and tears to overcome these things, and it has to be done by the community. It can't be done by an insurance company, and it can't be done by local politicians and bureaucrats saying, okay, well, we'll just do this and get this done so we can have it back in place. That's a quick fix, and it will only result in continued degradation of the worth of something that was there at one time. So those are kind of conceptual thoughts because I don't have the specifics that you have to deal with, but that's how I feel in my heart.
I had a couple questions. I feel bad. I kind of feel out of the loop here, but what has been the process so far in this? I know that there has been a public input period where they've been on display at the Community Development Department, but previous to that, has there been any cooperation with the community or children? I don't know, how long have these been on display and where have they been on display, and what has occurred up to this point as far as the process of coming up with these?
The boards were on display at both the Community Development Department and the library, and they've been on display, it's my understanding, for about a month. But this is not the first time there has been an attempt to organize around a community a Penny Park rebuild. The first time it was vandalized, there was an attempt to regrouped the old group.
I remember that. Yeah.
And the outcome of that was basically the people who worked so hard on that project are, Nick was in high school. Well, those members of the community who participated in that a lot are 15 to 20 years older than they were when they put all that effort into it. Those people were essentially tired and couldn't do it anymore. It really is going to require, if the community goes to a new effort to do it themselves or to have greater input into the rebuild, it's going to take a whole new generation of folks to come together. And a lot of families are more stressed today than ever. It is harder to find the time for any kind of volunteer. Look at the difficulty we have getting volunteers for boards and commissions. Look at the difficulty I had in even getting the early childhood community who has a vested interest in this to come out to one meeting. It's a different time. And as much as I agree with what you say, and what you say, George, I'm not sure that kind of effort is realistic in this community at this time.
Madam Chair, if I might, there was that process last time around. We lost a quarter of the park a few years ago, and there were some folks that stepped forward and say, hey, let's do it again. Well, I think where that process bogged down, there were a couple of factors involved in that. One was there were some issues with some of the materials that were used in the initial park build. And so there was a real division that formed in the community at that point over whether that was the correct material, whether it should have been used then, whether we should continue to allow it to be used now. This is the pressure-treated lumber that the park was built out of that I'm referring to. And there was a substantial segment of the community that advocated for just bulldozing the whole park and starting over, which at that point was something that no one could wrap their head around, the idea of throwing away all that work and having to begin again. So that whole community debate sort of bogged things down. There was that issue, and I think there was also a real problem. We're a body that deals with public process, and people in the community development department probably know more about community process than any other department of this town. And you know that there has to be some direction and guidance to public process. You can't just always put people into a room and expect them to hash that out and come to a solution in a timely manner. So I think also where we went wrong, and even though I wasn't involved in the last effort, I include myself in the we as a member of this community. I think where we went wrong is we did not, at the very beginning, have someone whose job it was to facilitate the process. People were trying to facilitate the process at the same time that they were trying to be involved in the discussion. And I don't think that that's something that you can do in a process where people have such strong feelings and there are so many different viewpoints. And so this time around, when the whole park burned, I think the feeling that I have gotten from talking to people in the town is that everyone was really burned out on the public thing because it had gone so poorly last time. So this time around, there was this company, they had the state contract, we can get this done quickly, the kids can have their park back. And again, I think if that's the direction as a community that we want to go in as a community, that's fine, but we need to be honest about what we're doing. We are not building a community-built park. We're building a nice playground. And those are two very different things. And I don't have kids. I hope to someday. I'm not going to play in this playground or any other playground that gets built myself, probably, as much as I wish I could. But what I'm interested in is that process. I mean, when you go through our comprehensive plan and you read all of those references to the community-built park, when you talk to people that move to this town and they cite that as one of the reasons, or some people the reason, that they moved to Silver City, they didn't move here because of a nice playground. They moved here because of a community-built park. And I refuse to believe that my town was capable of that once and is no longer capable of that. There are real stresses in this community. There are real problems, and people face challenges. But there are people who are capable of doing this, and they just need to be given that opportunity and that guidance. And that's what I'm asking for, and I'm hoping that I'm not alone. Maybe I am. Maybe I've completely misread this. Maybe our chair is correct. Maybe we are not capable of this as a community any longer. If that's true, it breaks my heart. It really does. And so I'm really hoping that at the next town council meeting we can get some people out there that say, we can do this. Just give us the opportunity. Because that's what people have been saying to me. That's what I've been hearing.
Well, this is certainly the moment to let the powers that be know how you feel about this issue. Because if people do not come forward as Nick has urged them to do, this is what we're going to end up with, and we'll have to live with it into the future.
Well, if so, I just quickly, if this is what we have to live with, I think you made some excellent comments on the design. I do believe there is something lost moving from the different materials, the wood to this. The amphitheater, I agree with, I thought was definitely underutilized. I mean, my daughter liked climbing those stairs and running around the amphitheater more than the playground equipment, but I think it does have to do with exactly what you said about the nooks and crannies, and if there is some way to do with this kind of material, I do think that is missing. I don't see that in this area, because she's only 3.5, and she's, most of her time spent in the park has been, as a small toddler, and that was enough entertainment for her, just, going under the slides and in the little nooks and crannies, and I do think that's lost. I think that the shade, I just assumed that, some of the shade wasn't shown in these concepts, or that wasn't part of the concepts. I do know there was the one shade structure, but it didn't occur to me that those trees aren't there, and so I definitely think that is a good point made on your part. But
and we certainly ought to use some of that insurance money to replace those trees. I don't see any plantings. This to me, there's no landscaping involved. It's not a play space. Mm-hmm. It's just a bunch of playground equipment scattered almost at random on a white sheet of paper. Mm-hmm. I see no plan. I see no adventure, no, leading from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to explore. That kind of magic is really missing from all of these designs.
I agree, and when friends or family come from out of town, and this is a wonderful playground, but I doubt that they would have the comments that they've had in the past, like, wow, what is this place? And Albuquerque doesn't have this, or, wherever they come from. It would just be, like you said, a nice playground, and, whatever we can do, I mean, if there is still time in this process, and if the town is willing to slow down a little bit, then I hope people do step up. I know we are all busy, especially parents, but I hope that there is some more opportunity for input on this, and hopefully even more than just additional input.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just encourage all of you to talk with the Department of Public Works, who is in charge of the parks and recreation, and let them know your feelings as soon as possible. If what you say is correct about the October 6th deadline, I think that
October 10th is my
October
recollection.
10th, excuse me. Now is the time to try to influence whatever decisions might be occurring, and it is the Department of Public Works that is the lead on this, because they have been responsible for maintaining that park as it was. So.
And they make the final decision.
I don't know if they will make the final decision, but they are the vehicle in charge of moving the process right now. I think the mayor is very much involved with the process. He was the one who introduced this at the Red Hot Children's Festival. He was out there all day long soliciting ballots. So.
Right.
Well, I think this has been a very useful discussion. Do we have any reports from staff?
Not from me.
Do you have any reports from the commission? I'm sure you backed me up against the P's asking for something. Do you want to bring it up?
Yeah. And of course, I got your email wrong still, so that's why I didn't. I had discussed, I've been here almost a year, but I still feel new, and I thought it would be nice for us to at some point get together as commissioners and discuss a couple of terms that we use all the time, hardship being one of them, harmony being another, that tend to be subjective, and maybe have a discussion about them and how to make them as consistent as possible when we do use them, in spite of the fact that they are subjective.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mr. Scavron, the town attorney, is also looking at hoping to find a time that he could work with the commission on training from the legal aspects of your service. So
That would be excellent.
and that might be a good time to dovetail those discussions in. And I think he's looking at it soon.
I would like him to defer until we get our new member on. I assume that the mayor is attempting to bring us up to full strength since they have they made a decision to keep us at 7?
I think that's coming up at the next council meeting, and I know that Mr. Scavron's been working with some of the issues of that whole resolution. So.
Well, if that is the case, I somehow thought it was already settled. But if they do keep us at 7 members, then I think we ought to wait until we get our final new member on board before we have that training, because it's a very important one.
I think you're right.
Very useful. And Commissioner Clemens had also suggested that one of the months when we don't have any regular business might be a good time to have the discussion that she's wanting to have. So we might keep that in mind.
They made a decision not to change us to 5, but they didn't make a decision to keep us at 7, if that makes sense. They rejected the previous ordinance that had been proposed, but they decided it was a big enough change that they had to basically do it.
And he is working on several parts of that ordinance, as far as I know.
I had a couple questions and comments. I didn't know where else in the meeting to ask. So I don't know if it's the case for everybody else, but the index of my land use code doesn't have any page numbers. Is that like...
Because they didn't do it.
Oh, okay.
I'm actually working on it, but I haven't gotten past the
I was so excited about the new land use code having an index, and you know, I meant to bring it up at a previous meeting, and then I was like, shoot, here I was looking and no page numbers. So Jim, I just think your staff reports are great. I think you're doing a great job. I would just ask if, maybe you could cite the sections in the land use code on some of the things, like the dimensional adjustment is a totally new request, and I had some difficulty, finding the different things you were talking about in the land use code. So if you could just cite those areas, maybe that would help. Also, I hadn't seen the notice of decision from the last meeting, and are we still reviewing the notices of decision? And
I didn't know you were. Notice of decisions?
Yes, I had. When I was asked to sign the notice of decision, I requested that it be sent around to all the other commissioners for their review, and I assumed that when I came in to sign it, that had been done, and there was no comment.
Perhaps because she wasn't involved in creating the decision, she wouldn't have been included on the decision before it was final and made public?
I didn't even think of that.
Oh, yes, that's very true. That's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened.
I did not even think of that.
Everyone else got it, right?
I got it.
I did not.
You didn't.
No.
Okay.
For the same reason.
That makes the way
that makes sense. I just didn't know. I know we didn't get an email for our packets, and I didn't know if maybe we accidentally didn't get an email.
You got an email for these packets.
Yes, I did. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The way that should work is that when they call me in, I say first send it out to all the commissioners. We get everybody's input, and when everybody's on the same page, then I go in and sign it.
Got it. And that's it. Thank you.
Any other reports from the commission? Community input. Do you have anything further you'd like to say to us? Then I would call this meeting into adjournment. I guess I need a motion for that.
Move adjourned.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.